See, I just kind of coursed this in as I was laying this out so I could get some of it, so I could finish this molding, basically, is what I was doing. So see, I come in there and I changed this guy. I was over here, and after looking at the drawing, it changed to where it goes. So I've got to bring it in there. So we'll just kind of erase our previous cut. Get out the wood eraser. You just got to be real careful using a chisel on this stuff, because if that catches at all, it'll flake out on you.
Would using a scraper be safer?
It's hard to use a scraper up against an edge. I usually jump to a file when I'm getting ready to... Because what you don't want is you don't want your wood to go like this into your carved edge. You don't want that. You want it to appear, the carving to appear to be laid on.
Okay.
You don't want it to appear to be carved right there. So the key is you got to reduce your background down to that level. So the goal is to basically get the gun to where the gun's all shaped basically to size. So you can say, okay, that's where I want the gun. So that anything you do carving wise, you're going in further, but you don't really leave wood to carve, because it won't look right. And the beauty of the file is that it's long and flat, and so I can level things out so I don't get a sudden fall off, because that's the one thing you don't want. It just looks like crap. And I know that this edge here is still going to get brought in.
Okay.
I'm not going to leave that square. The original gun was radiused, and I'm going to radius that edge up there. So I know I've got a little more to do than where I'm at right now on that edge. So any marks in my wood up in here, I'm not real worried about them. I'll get those later. Those will come in the next. But I got to have the barrel out to do that. I can't get there with the barrel in. So now I'm going to grab a scraper. And like this scraper is just made up to work a radius to an edge. So I can get in places and get right up against something if I want to. I'm not going to say their designs are symmetrical, but they play off of both sides of their designs. Like here, this V area here is playing off of this V area over here. And so somewhere in there, there's a place that you're going to put this one that's going to match that one optically and look right.
And you're just trying to find out where
I'm finding out where that is, yeah. Right now to make that leaf split right. I'm getting pretty close there. I'm going to take some of that black out so I can see it better. This is just a 0.7 millimeter ever sharp. But it's got like bee lead in it. It's real soft.
Real soft, okay.
Yeah. And I use that because, nice thing about that, and I don't think, on this particular gun, I don't think it would matter because this wood is harder than most metal. But it won't leave a mark on the wood. It won't dent it.
Okay, soft lead.
Yeah, it's soft lead. It will not dent the wood. And so that's really nice to have, is that I can draw and I don't have to worry about leaving a a dent in my wood by having that on there. And just having that being an Eversharp is just kind of nice because it's...
You don't have to sharpen it all the time.
Yeah, I don't have to do anything with it really. It just kind of takes care of itself. And I'm not saying this is an exact copy. It's just I like to try to get the carving fairly close to match because they did really nice work, which I could draw like those guys can. They just had all this type of thing down. And you have to figure that guys out on the edge, you know, were they trained, artistically trained, or did they just have it, or?
That's a good question. I mean, it wasn't like there was schools that you could study in, you know, unless you were studying under somebody.
I mean, they sit around and draw scrolls all the time and work these patterns out, or how did they do that? Because, I mean, it all drives me crazy just trying to figure it out, how they did it.
It's like a puzzle.
Yeah, it is. It's very much like a puzzle. Oh, where's he at there on that split? And that split's the one down there. Okay, so that split's lower. That little maneuver there is, sometimes guys will leave that into a tight V. I like to put a little bud in there because you end up with more of a stopping point. It's easier than trying to work back into a real tight corner.
Okay.
I mean, this corner here is about as tight as I really like to have. That one's still fairly easily worked. See, there's a little bit of, see that little flat right there?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just... Yeah, let's get rid of that. And fix that a little bit. And the key is just not to get in a hurry. Just a little bit at a time and kind of work your way around to get what you want. Just can't come in with too heavy of a hand on this stuff because it's... Okay, we gotta finish this guy up here. I'll probably leave that line to later because that's an inside line. Just probably gonna leave it till a little later to cut. Running right down that grain's kind of risky.
Does it want to run out on you?
It wants to split ahead of your tool. It's always the problem when you're lined up perfectly with the grain, is it'll try to get to running ahead of you. This has got so much curl in it that it's not a big problem. But if you had a kind of a, especially like walnut or something, a lot of times they'll try to get ahead of your tool when you're running right up the grain. That was a really short cut there, so it wasn't a big problem, but you could just see where it's left a little corner right there where it started on around here. It's not on the actual scroll, but it's to the outside of the scroll. It wanted to keep going because it had the grain with it. It's like everything else, really sharp tools. The sharper your tools, the better off you are. better chance you're going to have. And that's the nice thing about working in wood as opposed to engraving metal. Like, I want to tighten this scroll up a little bit. Kind of ran out on me a little. And because it's wood, I can do that on those outside edges. Out in here, I can go ahead and move my line over because I'm taking that wood away anyway on the outside. So it's irrelevant to me. And that's kind of where we are. Then you got to go back through and start cutting away your background. This little skew is just nice for these areas that have corners. Get right in there. It's like here on this forearm, you're on a fairly thin section of the gun. So the goal, in my mind, is to keep the carving pretty shallow here. It's not like up here on the cheek piece and things where I can go a little deeper and have a little more relief on it, or even over here. But here I'm kind of in the sleeker part of the gun, and I want to keep things kind of close. I don't want this carving, being 1/8 of an inch above the background. So I'm working in that direction to keep it so it doesn't get too...
How far do you want it protruding
Oh,
from the background?
I'm probably looking at maybe a 1/16 or a little more here.
Okay.
Is probably where I'm at. Consistency is the main thing of not having it be 1/8 of an inch here and a 30-second over here or something. It's getting a pretty consistent relief of the background, working your way into it. See that little dig there? Mm-hmm. Just went in there and chipped that out that quick. And this tool's sharp. It's not a dull tool. But that's that curl. That's what that curl wants to do all the time. All of your bright lines are your dips.
Okay. I assumed the opposite.
No, when he saw that flake out, see that flake out right there? It's right on the edge of that white line. And that's the wrinkle going into the other line. And that's why a lot of that, I get in kind of around the carving, and then I'll take, that double-ended file kind of point.
Oh, yeah.
Then I'll take a file like this. It doesn't have to be this particular one, but it's flat there. And a lot of times then that's what I start going in there and start leveling things back out, because I don't have to worry about it chipping out that wood. Because again, if we were on a cheek piece or somewhere where we can go fix it, is one thing, but up in here we don't have anywhere to go.
Right.
So we have to make sure we don't make any more problems for ourselves. So by switching over to a file type tool from a chisel, I know that I'm not going to create a bigger mess. When I've got scrapers and things, I can go in there and work with too, but typically I'll go to that file next and start kind of working my way in, because it's how I'm going to blend myself back into my other surface of the gun. On this where you're fairly shallow, that that blend back doesn't have to be too far. And like here you have the advantage of this radius too, so you can hide it quicker because you're already curved here. Now here you got to really blend it back in to get yourself back to the other surface. And again, it's the runs going this way across the grain aren't as bad as the long runs where I'm kind of going with the grain is really where I run the greatest risk of a chip out, tear out of some kind. Or hook one of those curls and it pulls out on me and then I've got a mess I got to go fix. So what I did there was rather than work that long run with the grain, I worked the two ends across the grain first. And that shortened my long run with the grain. Then I can go back and again, it's just slow, easy, no big cuts. We aren't moving tons of wood here. We're just separating the carving from the background. And I don't know if it'd be worth mentioning these glasses or not. But what these are just, you can do the same thing with a pair of readers, but they just have my bifocal prescription in the entire lens. So however I look through them, I'm always into, and actually it's a little stronger than my bifocal prescription, so I can get it a little closer. Because typically bifocals, I think, are prescribed to like 14 or 16 inches. And these are just, these are at about 9 or 10, which is about the limit. You get anything much closer than that and you really start trying to pull your eyes to the center too much. So just putting these like shade lines in here, same kind of line you use on a engraving. They get smaller as they go back. Just kind of cut them in and then I mean, they'll show up when the finish is on it. They'll come around and you'll actually be able to see them. Just got to do a little of a contour in here. This is really low relief stuff, so I'm kind of limited to, I don't want to try to give it too much depth. Just a little bit in a couple places. Just trying to lose the entirely flat appearance of it. You just don't want to get carried away. That's about all I'm going to do.
So that's the finished carving there?
Yep, that's probably done there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just not as, I don't know, complicated as some of the gun, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the entry pipe carving isn't all that wild. I'm going to do a little more cleanup, obviously, on my background and things. But overall, I've got it about where I want it.